For how long is the Battle of Bakhmut going to keep on going? Today, we're going to take a closer look at the Russian military's ongoing assault on the small Ukrainian city and the potential cost of capturing it. The Russians have intensified their attacks with a combination of artillery, mortar fire, and airstrikes, along with a substantial commitment of ground forces. But at what cost? Will taking Bakhmut mark a turning point in the conflict, or is it just another tactical victory in a broader struggle or control? Join us as we explore this question and more. Russia's potential capture of the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut could come at a heavy cost. The Russians have intensified their attacks with a combination of artillery, mortar fire, and airstrikes, along with a substantial commitment of ground forces. However, this does not necessarily mean that Russian forces are improving or learning from past mistakes. Mick Ryan, a former Australian general, suggests that the Ukrainian armed forces may decide to withdraw from Bakhmut, which could be seen as a routine tactic rather than a harbinger of disaster. In fact, the Ukrainians have used Bakhmut to inflict massive losses on the attacking force. There comes a moment when it is smarter to withdraw than suffer growing losses, and the damaging blow to morale of seeing the surrender of hundreds and maybe thousands of surrounded Ukrainian soldiers. For the Russians, taking Bakhmut would not alter the fundamental shortcomings in their campaign. They still rely on massive barrages of indirect fire to pulverize defensive positions. This was the tactic used in the cities of Mariupol, Severodonetsk, and Lysychansk last year. However, persistent fire demands an efficient logistics chain, and Russian forces still struggle in that regard. The end game in Mariupol and other cities taken last year ultimately involved MED, advancing street by street, but they were rarely Russian regulars. More often, they were Chechen units, militia from the self-declared Luhansk and Donetsk republics, and small numbers of Wagner operatives. The campaign to take Soledar in January and now nearby Bakhmut has been out of the same playbook, but with one notable and gruesome exception. The waves of infantry recruited by Yevgeny Prigozhin's Wagner group sent to flood Ukrainian defenses. Prigozhin has acted unilaterally to shame the Russian military and burnish his own reputation. Wagner fighters taken prisoner by the Ukrainians told CNN they had next to no coordination with regular Russian forces, except for artillery support, as they were sent forward in their hundreds and thousands into the Ukrainian line of fire. Prigozhin bragged last week that if Wagner left Bakhmut, the front would fall. The Russian military's ongoing assault on the small Ukrainian city of Bakhmut has been marked by a brutal wave of artillery, mortar fire, and airstrikes, coupled with a heavy ground presence from both Russian regulars and Wagner private military company fighters. Despite facing intense opposition, the Russians are closing in on the city, and if they do take it, it would be their first victory in 8 months. But the question remains, at what cost? Experts warn that any victory in Bakhmut would likely be short-lived, as the Russian forces continue to rely on massive barrages of indirect fire to decimate their opponents' defensive positions. While this tactic may succeed in capturing a city like Bakhmut, it is unsustainable along the thousands of kilometers of front lines that stretch across the region. Furthermore, the Russian military seems to be employing a strategy of overwhelming Ukrainian defenses with wave after wave of infantry, regardless of the staggering casualty rates that such an approach incurs. In some cases, Russian units have suffered losses up to 80%. Such tactics have led some experts to predict that conditions are ripe for a large-scale Russian military mutiny. While focus on Bakhmut may be seen as an obsession, driven by the need for any kind of win, the Ukrainian military's strategy of holding the line is grounded in a broader understanding of the conflict. Ukrainian forces recognize that every meter of ground that they give up will cost the Russian military hundreds of lives. As the conflict between Ukraine and Russia has been ongoing for years, with both sides experiencing heavy losses. In recent months, Russia has mobilized a large number of men into uniform and turned to its Wagner forces as shock troops to try to gain an advantage. However, the Modern War Institute at West Point has pointed out that Russia has been unable to effectively integrate new forces into damaged formations or build cohesive teams from scattered remnants. The country is now trying to fight a prolonged conflict with a pickup team of replacements while also suffering from severe battlefield leadership attrition. One of the issues with Russia's approach is their reliance on battalion tactical groups, combined arms formations that have proven ill-equipped for the Ukrainian conflict due to a lack of infantry and reconnaissance. This vulnerability was apparent in their advance towards Kyiv last year, where they were vulnerable to ambush. In addition to these deficiencies, Russian military personnel's inadequate training, incompetence, and strict hierarchies that value obedience over initiative have prevented them from coordinating advances deep into enemy territory quickly. The lack of competent mid-level commanders has added to Russia's troubles, and they have responded to battlefield struggles by turning to their past model of fielding a large conscript force. However, this mass approach has led to unsustainable levels of casualties and exhaustion of men and resources that could have been better utilized in the future. Furthermore, the Russian focus on capturing the towns of Soledar and Bakhmut may have come at the cost of operations elsewhere. Bakhmut, in particular, holds minimal strategic importance and almost no remaining infrastructure to support an occupying force. The fact that Russia has invested so much in its capture speaks volumes about their poor strategy in this war. As Russian forces encroaching on the city of Bakhmut in an effort to take control. At the center of Russia's efforts is the Wagner Group, a mercenary organization that has sent its elite elements in an attempt to break through Ukrainian defenses. However, experts warn that the fierce fighting may result in severe losses for the Wagner Group, depriving Russia of its most effective shock troops. Yevgeny Prigozhin is said to be fearful of Russia's tactics, as his forces are being hung out to dry by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Prigozhin has made appeals in recent days suggesting that he fears the Russian Ministry of Defense is fighting the Battle of Bakhmut to the last Wagner fighter, exposing his forces to destruction. Analysts at the Institute of the Study of War thinks that Prigozhin's fears may be well-founded, as the battle for Bakhmut could severely degrade the Wagner Group's best forces. This, in turn, could force the Russian military to choose between abandoning the effort or throwing more high-quality troops into the battle, which could result in even more losses. They also believe that the opportunity to damage the Wagner Group's elite elements, along with other elite units if they are committed, in a defensive urban warfare setting where the attrition gradient strongly favors Ukraine is an attractive one. However, these developments could have positive ramifications beyond the battlefield. They conclude that Putin's decision to allow the Russian Ministry of Defense to hang Prigozhin out to dry could badly damage his power and reputation within Russia, which would be an important accomplishment from the standpoint of restoring sanity in Russia. This would be an aim in both America's and Ukraine's interests, and it raises the stakes in the Battle of Bakhmut beyond matters of terrain and battle space geometry. As the battle continues to unfold, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has vowed not to retreat from Bakhmut. Meanwhile, experts warn that Russia is caught in a disastrous doom loop, with its population shrinking and its military suffering from severe battlefield leadership attrition. The lack of infantry and reconnaissance within combined arms formations, along with an ingrained culture that values obedience over imitative, has made it difficult for Russia to effectively integrate new forces into damaged or build cohesive teams from ad hoc groupings of scattered unit remnants. In conclusion, the Russian military's intensified assault on Bakhmut has been marked by brutal waves of artillery and heavy ground presence. However, the sustainability of their tactics and the cost of victory remain uncertain. The Ukrainian military's strategy of holding the line, recognizing that every meter of ground given up will cost the Russian military hundreds of lives, may prove more effective in the long run. Furthermore, the Russian military's reliance on inexperienced forces and ill-equipped formations, coupled with a lack of competent mid-level commanders, may hinder their progress in the conflict. Thank you for joining us in this video, and don't you forget to leave a subscribe to not miss out on any news regarding the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia.